trainers, it's Poke time. This is what's your favorite Pokemon, and then I say something nice about you. Hashtag WYFPATISSNAY, but you knew that already. It's self-evident of what the acronym of the show is. It's WYFPATISSNAY. It's a podcast where we all get to think about Pokemon for a little while and nothing else. Although, of course, when we're talking about world building, it's a metaphor for our world. So we will be thinking about other things. It's a little bit different in this episode. But I'm Eric Silver, Pokemaster, and I like my candies rare. But I went on StockX and I got some ultra rare candies for as much as I pay in rent. This episode, as I said, is a little bit different because we have someone who does not like Pokemon as much as me, but I'm very excited to have her on. It's Dr. Moiya McTier.
Hello. Eric, how many people do like Pokemon as much as you? Because I am not anti-Pokemon. I'm a fan, but you are a super duper uber fan, I think.
There are people who like Pokemon more than me, and I'm like, wow. Because the thing is, I kind of like the world building aspect of it. Like, I like how the games fit together. I like the idea of Pokemon and how this, like, incredibly long-running video game has, like, accidentally created some very interesting ideas of this world. We're not going to talk about it, but Moiya, did you know that there's a video game out there that's going to be Pokemon with guns?
Why do they need guns? They have animals that can shoot electricity or fire out of various parts of their bodies.
Exactly.
This genuinely makes no sense to me. This is world building that follows the structure and timeline of the human world when it doesn't need to, because we have guns and other technology because that's how we learned how to fight. But if you had Blastoises, you're trying to tell me if you have an Onix or if you have why would you need guns?
I know, we wouldn't. It's called Pal World. It's been teased for a while. I'll send you it to you later. We were going to talk about it. I'm like, there's nothing to talk about. There's really nothing to talk about.
But there's plenty to vent about.
Yes, true. It's getting closer and closer. I don't know if you know, Moiya, but like this time, like in mid to late June, is when all of the video game companies start saying all the new stuff that's coming out. This is like preview time. So this game, Pal World, has been like slowly surfacing. We're getting closer and closer to whether or not this is not just an elaborate prank. It's actually a video game, but it's coming. Like, there's a beta coming very soon, and I'm really worried. I feel like I'm gonna have to play it just for WYFPATISSNAY.
Yes. Yeah. If only just to shit on it a little bit.
Just to know what the deal is, what's going on. Moiya, I'm really happy that you're here because I feel like we're doing like a little bit of a home and home about Pokemon. I went on Exolore in January 28th, 2021 to do, I know, it feels like such a long time ago, to talk about the world building in Pokemon. Let me read your episode description back to you. Eric Silver joins us to answer my burning questions about the Pokemon world, and together we discuss the weirdest and world-breakingest Pokemon.
We did.
But that's where we looked up and it was like, yeah, Torkoal's inner temperature is like hotter than the sun. And we're like, that's bad. I think that's bad.
That's bad physics, but it's good gaming.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So I feel like I came onto Exolore and did Exolore things there. Like, I brought Eric Silver to Exolore. But now Dr. Moiya McTier, scientist and folklorist, is coming to WYFPATISSNAY to kind of talk about the big questions in Pokemon. There are some things that have come up a lot, especially when like Mischa and I start talking about the religiosity involved in Pokemon and like how Japan reflects that upon like the Western world as most video, or upon themselves and also the Western world in terms of video game consumption. We end up talking about these big questions that are really confusing, and I needed someone who wants to get heady with me and talk about this stuff.
That's me. Let's do it.
Hell yeah. Well, first I want to ask you two specific questions because I think we touched on this a little bit. Yeah, what's your relationship to Pokemon throughout your life? Again, as established, you and Thoreau were the same in that you did all of your study on the side of Walden Pond and you did not have access to television early in your life.
Exactly the same. Yeah. Henry David Thoreau let his lease lapse and then my family moved into Walden Pond. So I did not have much experience with Pokemon growing up. I was too poor to get the cards, and there weren't a lot of people around to play the game with. So because I'm in the woods.
Fair. Yes, exactly.
But there was 1 year when I was in first grade. So like 2001, 2002.
Hell yeah.
And I would go to my Nana's house, my grandma's house after school every day, and I would sit at her table in the kitchen. I would do all my homework. She would make me a bologna and mayonnaise sandwich,
Hell yeah.
and then I would go into her bedroom and watch the Pokemon TV show.
Oh.
And that is the only experience I have with it.
That's fine, honestly. The anime is a good entry point. And you can't say this I don't know if I can necessarily say this about a lot of other video game cartoon adaptations. They were pretty close. I know obviously they do it. It was a little mushy. Notoriously in the Yu-Gi-Oh anime, the rules make absolutely no sense. As compared to the actual game. But the Pokemon anime is pretty close because they didn't know it was going to blow up. So they kind of was just like, yeah, let's do it. But I guess we're not going to put that much time or money or effort into it. And then it got good eventually.
Yeah, that is the interesting thing about these. I can't really call it small or grassroots. Like, it's a big company over there that makes Pokemon, right? But when you build something and you put it out into the world without knowing how it's going to react, and then you have to build on top of it with this base that you've already constructed without the pressures of everyone looking at you. Like, it's such an interesting thing to watch from a world builder's perspective.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, this isn't just with like card games are from Japan. I mean, all of our favorite 80s cartoons like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, it was just a way, and like He-Man, it was just a way to sell toys. Like the cartoon was just marketing to children to remind them to tell their parents to go buy the toys. And like the fact that like there's art and there's like actual art involved becomes accidental. Like, oops, whoops. That's why I always find all of the Marvel movies so funny. Because again, it's like, wow, we're trying to be really serious about like some dudes in the 70s just trying to make like $2 a day.
That's really what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I really like watching world building unfold over a long period of time because you get to see when different people join the team, when different philosophies come into play, because you can see how they're making different decisions about their world building. Pokemon is really interesting because it has all of these iterations or all of these generations of Pokemon, and you can try and tease out what the differences between the subsequent generations are. Yeah. That's a fun exercise.
Yes. I mean, we're going to touch on this in a second, but like, it's very funny that in the first generation, there was Mewtwo, which is like a genetically created Pokemon, even before there's any gods. Like there were legendaries, which is like the legendary birds that were named after the Spanish words for 1, 2, and 3. Articuno, Zapdos, and Moltres. Shout out to the American adaptation team. And then Mewtwo's just like there. It's like that's what they wanted to get across. There are these bad guys called Team Rocket genetically modifying a Pokemon that is so powerful. It is like an adaptation of like a mythical Pokemon we don't even know exists. And like that was in the first game.
So like a Frankenstein type of unnatural aberration that some evil team put together.
Yes, that's Mewtwo, straight up.
Mewtwo?
Like he was the bad. He was like the last Pokemon in the whole thing. Yeah, it's like they took Mew's DNA, which is kind of like, I know that there's obviously been some like distinctions between like gods and legendary Pokemon, but Mew's kind of just like an angel vibing out, very much like a cherubic sort of like beautiful creature. And they took Mew's DNA and like, here's Mewtwo, who is a abomination and hates humans for what they've done to him. Like that's in the first game.
You?
I would too. It's just I love they led with that.
Right out the gate.
Yeah. Okay. My second question I have to ask. I ask everyone who comes on WYFPATISSNAY, and I think I will modify it for you. Do you have a piece of Pokemon merch in your apartment right now?
No.
Interesting.
No, there might be a sticker on a very old laptop, but otherwise no.
I respect that. That's fine. I figured I'd ask.
Do most people have Pokemon paraphernalia in their homes?
Oh, yeah. It's big business.
Oh.
Very big business. Also, notoriously, the Pokemon Center, which is this... Okay, so back on what you were talking about before of like who makes this. So Game Freak is the video game creator, but like the Pokemon company spun off or is related to Nintendo as a separate entity once it got so big, and then they started making merch and stuff. And the Pokemon Center is kind of the official merch store of the Pokemon company, and they make really, really high quality stuffed animals notoriously. And they also make like really cool shirts and stuff. They have like a new Team Rocket capsule collection, which are like the notorious bad guys from the first game, and it looks really hot.
Oh, I remember Jesse and James.
Oh yeah, Jesse and James.
As a little budding bisexual, I remember Jesse and James.
Yeah, so now you can get their hot fashions, Moiya, that just dropped.
Good. A new Halloween idea.
Well, hopefully, as I've already teased to you, but I'm going to tell you your new favorite Pokemon by the end of this episode. So maybe you can get a little stuffed animal from the Pokemon Center of them.
Okay, I'd like that. Yeah.
Because we're talking about big questions, Moiya, I think it's fair that like we have like a bonfire going and we're like on the beach and we're like both of us are in like big hoodies and shorts.
Absolutely. Yeah, with the fire crackling, I am getting my foot as close to the fire as I can without burning myself because I have cold feet.
Yeah. And I'm like, Moiya.
Bad circulation.
Yeah, and I keep throwing just like whatever sticks around into the fire. And I keep throwing it, and I'm like, should I throw plastic in the fire? No, I shouldn't.
No, I'm over here like, no, Eric, bad fumes. Don't do it.
There's like a beach party happening somewhere over on the other side of the bonfire, but Moiya and I were like, hey, let's have our deep conversation. Moiya, I can't believe we're not going to the same college next year. I'm really going to miss you.
So sad, but you're always going to be a part of my life, Eric. I'll never forget you.
I'll add you on Facebook. I know you're going to Smart University and I'm going to Middling University State, but I mean, they're only 30 miles away. I can come to your parties and stuff.
Well, totally. And you'll get along with everyone at the school.
Yeah, we both go to school in Boston, but we won't say what schools we go to in Boston.
I hate how true that stereotype is.
It's really true.
People have called me out on it too. They're like, "Oh, you went to school in Boston. I know where you went."
It's like, Moiya, we know. We get it. It's like, no, I could have went to one of either of those smart schools. Because I also know science,
Wellesley.
so it's fine.
I went to Tufts. It's fine.
Yeah, go fight in jumbos. I know it. All right. So, Moiya, here are my big questions about Pokemon. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Here's my first question for you. What is it about humans that love having little monsters hang out with us all the time? I realize it's just to give you some context from the video game. Like a lot of the times they hang out in Pokeballs, right? Which might just be like a digital issue. You don't want Pokemon hanging out all the time when you're making your video game or your anime. But at the same time, Pikachu in Pokemon Yellow, which was like the second iteration after Red and Blue of that first generation, like Pikachu was following you around and was out the entire time. So Pikachu was hanging out.
In the show, Pikachu was just hanging out.
Yeah, especially in the show. Yeah. It was almost like again, another beautiful whiff of world building is like all of the Pokemon are in Pokeballs except for the mascot we want you to see at all times.
Except for the one that is going to be the cute face of the show.
Yeah, who's also terribly, scary, powerful. So what is it about humans that love these fictional stories of having like a little guy who hangs out with you and also can like do damage that humans can't do? Because I mean, like, when we're talking about familiars or we're talking about daemons, like, what is it?
Yeah, familiars, daemons. I'd say even pets falls into this. Humans love companionship. We are so lonely.
True.
I did some research into familiars because you specified that that's what you were aiming at, but I also wanted to look at pets because I think they're very similar.
Sure.
But there are a lot of, especially European religions and religious practices throughout history that have familiars included. When we're talking about like the witch trials, when we're talking about paganism and Wicca, whether that's thousands of years ago or the modern Wiccans, they are stereotypically associated with cats as familiars. So like there is this stereotype of a witch having a cat, but that comes from kind of old European associations between spinsters and cats.
Right.
Spinster loner women who are unmarried and kind of on the outskirts of society. They would be surrounded by a lot of cats, right. typically. But you could also have a dog as a familiar, birds, toads, frogs. There is one story from the Salem witch trials of a man actually using magic to get a dog to do his bidding and attack someone else, and the dog was tried and persecuted.
Hell yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's awesome.
Hell yeah.
Moiya, there's nothing in the rule book that says a dog can't be a witch.
You're right. You are right. Because in that Western view, familiars were assigned or given to witches by the devil. And their job was to help the witch do the devil's evil bidding on Earth. But from the practitioner's side of things, from people who identify as Wiccan or pagan, the familiars are more like spiritual guides and protectors. People who are Wiccans today who have familiars, who have these close animal companions, they talk about their familiars protecting them from evil spirits. They talk about the familiars guiding them through their spiritual practices. And so their companionship. There are also other religions. It's not just Wicca and paganism. There are Scandinavian practices of having more spiritual familiars, like folklore creatures, like these elves, maybe little dwarves or fairies, these fae creatures that could guide you through the spirit realm. And then when we get to pets, humans have had pets for a long time. There's evidence that we had intentional relationships with dogs for more than 30,000 years.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. This is like the thing where like an old-time human and a wolf is like, hey, do you want this meat? And do you want to just like hang out near my fire? Mm-hmm. Would you like that?
Yeah, it's a beneficial relationship. It's mutually beneficial. They provide companionship. They do provide protection. Guard dogs are very much a thing. I like to think of Cosmo as a guard cat. He's not very effective, but he has the spirit. I call him my vicious little murder baby. If a cockroach gets in, he will attack.
Fully true. The reason why you have cats is to kill vermin, whether we're talking about like a witch living on her own because she needs someone else to help her, or like I know that cats, there's a tradition of cats being in breweries and in bars. Yeah. So that he's like, I need you to keep stuff away from this sweet, sweet fermenting grain I have.
Yes, but we didn't do that on purpose. The cats did that. That's one of my favorite differences between cats and dogs. We domesticated dogs. Cats domesticated themselves. They just inserted themselves into our lives. And so we like having cute little guys around because they make us feel less lonely. They protect us from the dangers of nature. And there are mental health benefits for sure. They reduce our stress and our anxiety, and they're cute to look at.
Oh, for sure. I think it's always fun knowing that Pokemon comes from the creator. I should pull up his name. I will. How this was based on his love of catching bugs. So it's like, well, I like finding new cool dudes. And then also, what if they were a cat type creature who hung out with me?
Right. Like, I really like grasshoppers, but they're too small. What if I make a big grasshopper or a big caterpillar, right? And I get it to walk around with me.
Yeah. What is it about these familiars that can do, like, what can they do that humans can't do? I think that what's always really interesting about the initial starter Pokemon plus Pikachu, that we're talking about fire, water, grass, and electric, which are basic elements of our world. And then it's like, well, we like Charmander because he can shoot fire, and that's tight. Squirtle can shoot water. Bulbasaur can whip someone with a vine, which I can't do as a person. And Pikachu obviously is incredibly powerful little electric mouse. Like, okay, dogs have sharp teeth that we humans don't. But like, are there other things that of these familiars and daemons? Like, what are their powers that they can do that humans can't do?
Oh, that's a great one. They can get into spaces that we can't. If you've ever seen a cat crawl through a hole that looks like it's way too small, like that seems like a magical ability.
Well, I do follow liquid cats on Twitter, so yes.
Yes, exactly. They're liquid and we are solid. We cannot begin to understand or fathom their existence. Yeah, so they can fit into small spaces. They have senses that are stronger and different than ours. So sometimes cats do seem to just be like staring into a corner and it seems like they're looking at something specific, and it's really easy to make the leap from them looking in the corner to us thinking that they are seeing into another realm, that they have access to information that we don't have, which is really good for guarding and really good for connecting with the spiritual world, which has been important in a lot of different religions. They are fast.
Right.
They can eat stuff that we can't eat without getting sick. You know, they don't have the appendix, like they can eat uncooked food. They can do a lot of small things that humans can't do.
I honestly, it's like, yeah, that cockroach is just gone. I don't have to kill it and then throw it out. It just disappeared.
It disappears into the portal tummy. Into the cat's.
It goes into the portal and then it appears 500 feet away somewhere else.
Right. If you go on a walk and you're like, oh, what is this pile of old bones and exoskeletons that just appeared?
It's from the portal of my cat familiar. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Yeah. What specifically, I want to know more about like the dwarves and the elves and stuff. Like, are they also just like little guys who get in places, or can they do things with like their magics?
Yeah, I think throughout a lot of different folklore, these otherworldly beings have real impacts on our world. If something goes missing, actually, I still do this. My mom taught me well that whenever something goes missing, it's the pixies or it's the fairies. And they have taken something either to punish me or to teach me a lesson, and maybe it'll turn up later. I just have to make my peace with the fact that the fairies have taken it. Especially in Scandinavian countries where still there is a large reported fraction of the population that still believes in magical creatures like elves, there might be more of a cultural understanding or a cultural belief that there are these little invisible creatures that do stuff in the world when we're not watching. They take stuff away, they return lost objects, and if there's like a sort of coincidence in your life, you know, they've been working behind the scenes to make that coincidence happen. They can look over you with favor, or they can look on you and bring misfortune to your life. So you really want to make sure you have a good relationship with these invisible forces around you, which is also just a way of getting people in your society to respect nature and respect like the stuff in your environment.
I like that a lot because I think that we've drilled down on like 3 things that humans wish we could do but can't. One is like be powerful or do damage without weapons, which is like sharp teeth, claws, or elemental shooting. As we've talked about. The second is invisibility, which I think is something that you just touched on, or being particularly sneaky. And then the final thing is flight or traveling far distances, which of course your bird familiar would do, which is why we have flying Pokemon.
Yeah, that's great.
I like that. I like that a lot. Hey, it's Eric, and I got you Pokemon gummies. Why are there not gummies that are all of the different stones, and then you could take them and think that you're evolving in a different way? That should definitely exist. Why does that not exist? Mischa, invent it! Please continue to support this wonderful independent content and join the Patreon, patreon.com/gamesandfeelings. As I said last week, we're starting ad-free episodes. If you don't want to hear me talk about this stuff, no mid-rolls, just straight content. And on top of that, you get bi-weekly episodes of the replay that aren't just on the full feed. Patreon.com/gamesandfeelings, and shout out to our producer level patrons, Polly Burge, Kelsey Duffy, and Peyton, who have working GameCubes so you can play Mario Kart Double Dash whenever you want. It's that orange spice color. I also want to shout out my TikTok if you're on that thing. It's been really fun just kind of messing around and exploring it. I'm Eric the Silver, and it's been really fun to mess around on there. I'm posting NPCs for you to steal, other gaming stuff. Go check that out on TikTok, or I'm reposting it to my Instagram and stuff. And you can just find the link in the episode description as well. Go check me out on TikTok. It is a great day to try one of the other shows from here at the Multitude Collective. You can listen to one of Dr. Moiya McTier's shows, Pale Blue Pod, which is an astronomy podcast for people who are overwhelmed by the universe but want to be its friend. Moiya and Corinne demystify space one topic at a time with open eyes, open arms, and open mouths from laughing so much and dropping your jaws. By the end of the episode, the cosmos will feel a little less, too scary, and a lot of more, so cool. New episodes every Monday, weekly, wherever you get your podcasts. Pale Blue Pod. We are sponsored this week by PotionSlingers, a fantastic deck-building strategy card game. PotionSlingers is deck building with a twist. The decks are built while you play, and cards stick around until you use them, so you can stack and combine them to your heart's content. It's super accessible to fans of multiplayer deck building, and I know you are, or for anyone who's trying to get into tabletop games. All of the characters have their own playstyle, as well as a neat flip ability that upgrades them when certain conditions are met. The game's weird and wild. Every card is an obtuse pun, an alchemy reference, a deep cut, or all of the above. I have had so much fun checking out this game. I even came up with a few cards that are inspired by Games and Feelings and Join the Party. You can check it out there. They'll be released. You can do little stickers and just be able to play with them. So you can play with 3 cards I came up with. Isn't that sick? Check it out right now. Go to PotionSlingers.com to see the cards for yourself and buy a copy. That's PotionSlingers.com. All right, let's get back to the show. Okay, I got a second question. The whole thing of Pokemon is when you begin, you are always playing a child.
Yes. No matter what, you can't choose to be an adult in this world.
You are in a world of adults as you run into trainers and gym leaders and professors and the Pokemon League and sometimes the bad people. There's always an antagonist involved, and they're always at least teenagers, if not truly adults. But you're always 10, which I find deeply funny. Yeah. When I initially asked this question, you responded and said, yeah, you're 10 when you play the game. Duh.
Duh. I mean, that is the primary reason. We can't have this conversation and pretend that that's not why.
Right. But this had a further question that I wanted to know about is can we talk about the age of adulthood throughout a bunch of societies? Obviously, in the modern Western world, it's 18 or 21, which feels old, especially comparing to the vibes you get from other places, like when you do communion, or obviously when you get bar mitzvahed. From what I know, you're 13, which is very young when you think about it, because you're in 7th grade. And I didn't know anything, and it's I'm a man. I'm really good at being a man.
With your voice that hasn't even changed
I'm
yet.
a man. Yeah, I did it. So, yeah, can we talk about the age of adulthood and is 10 a little too young to have your first Pokemon and go on your adventure?
Real quick, no. I looked into different rites of passage from around the world, and there was a big range of ages that I saw, and it ranged from about 7 to 20 or 21.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, I want to hear it.
Yeah. So first, I think it's important to talk about why we have these rite of passage rituals. Why is it so common everywhere to have a celebration or a ritual that marks the transition from childhood to adulthood? Mm-hmm. And that is because as humans, we have a very noticeable puberty. This is a cultural aspect that is, I think, a direct result of our actual biology. If we were a little bit less sexually dimorphic as a species, if there weren't these noticeable differences between male and female, not that it's that simple of a binary spectrum, but
just talking about our literal biology for sure.
Yeah. So we have a very noticeable puberty. We start growing hair in different places. Our voices change. For some of us, we start to menstruate, and it's a very scary thing. Oh my God, why is blood happening?
That's wild. That's really wild when you think about it. Alien coming down, it's so one group of your dudes
yes,
bleed once a month, and they're and then you're yep, I guess.
Yeah. And we just go about our lives while it's happening. Because we're not allowed to bring attention to it, whatever.
It's like, oh yeah, same thing happens with my tentacles. Yeah, no, I understand. I get it.
Right. I would love to find a menstruating alien species. I would love for that to be the first one we make contact with.
I'm surprised no one's like applied that. I'm sure that it has happened, but I don't read sci-fi enough to have an example of this particular metaphor. But I'm surprised that I can't pull an example out of the ether really easily of like a metaphor for menstruation in an alien species.
That might be because of how we tend to base alien species off of non-human or usually non-mammal things on Earth. I mean, so many aliens are humanoid, and then we don't really get into a lot of the details of their biological functions. But when we're trying to make something that is very alien, we usually model it after bug type.
Right. Yeah,
things.
I was going to say they're like insectoid or reptilian, but it just so happens they have 2 legs and 2 arms.
Exactly. So yeah, we have very noticeable puberties. And as humans, I think throughout history, there is nothing we love more than marking a noticeable transition in nature.
If there's one thing humans love.
We love to celebrate cycles. We love to celebrate the changing of the seasons. We love to celebrate when new crops come up. We love to celebrate when the tides change. We love that shit. And so I think it's interesting for a coming of age thing because puberty doesn't happen to everyone at the same time.
Right.
It happens at different ages. And even now, there are studies that show, especially among girls, that puberty is happening earlier and earlier because there are hormones and other chemicals in a lot of the stuff we eat. But that's
that's wild.
Different conversation.
That's another very confusing conversation. Right. Not in the Pokemon episode of a games advice podcast.
Although maybe because the typical age for puberty used to be around like 14, 15 for people assigned female at birth. And now it's closer to like 10, 11, 12. So we are getting down to the Pokemon age.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah. The other reason we see such a wide range of when these rites of passage happen is because not every culture assigns adulthood at the same milestone. Like for some people it might be puberty, but for other cultures it might be your marriage or maybe even having a kid or moving out from your parents' home. Like there are these different touchstones. And so I found a few examples of really interesting rite of passage rituals from around the world. And then I definitely want to hear more about the bar and bat mitzvah practice. But the youngest ritual that I found comes to us from Vanuatu Island. It's this little island chain in the South Pacific Ocean. And the practice there is for young boys who jump off of this giant human-constructed tower. It's almost 100 feet tall, and they jump off of this tower with a little vine tied to their feet, but it's like it's not as reliable as bungee jumping. One number off in your calculation and you're just dead. And they start doing this at 7 years old.
Moiya, here's the thing. That's tight as hell. Again,
that's tight as hell.
If we were zooming out and we're like, you learned about this, or it's like you heard that someone was doing it, it's like, that's awesome. Glad that's not my people. I'm glad I don't have to do that.
I'm glad it's not my people because I 100% would have done this.
Yeah, for sure.
As a girl, I imagine I would have had to do this, like in secret. Or with trickery. I would have had to pull a Mulan to jump off of this giant tower that probably would have made me leap to my death,
You must be swift to jump off the tower.
With all the force of all the gravity bringing you to the ground. It's so dangerous. But they start doing it around 7 or 8 years old, and they will do this several times before they are considered men in their society.
That kind of makes sense to me, though, is like theoretically, if this is a tradition passed on from like a time when you need to defend yourself, it's a trial of fortitude. It's a trial of courage.
Yes. So many of these are, especially for boys, they are trials of courage and strength and like survivability. So this next one is for the Inuit boys, young Inuit boys on Baffin Island, which is this island like to the northeast of Canada. Around the age of 11 or 12, young boys will start going out to hunt in the wilderness with their parents, with their fathers and other people from the community. But that is a test of how well can you survive in the wilderness and how well can you provide for your community. That is, so a lot of these rites of passage are testing things that are traditionally associated with that gender role. So for boys, it's strength and bravery. For girls, a lot of the time it's like beauty and cleanliness and you're ready to get married and have a baby. Right. Yay. So for one of the ones that I found is a Sri Lankan ritual. It's for young girls the summer after they have their first period, or like in the year after they have their first period, and the exact date of it depends on some astrology stuff.
Sure.
But the young new women will be separated from the rest of their community. They're not allowed to have contact with boys or men for a few days. And then they undergo this ritual bathing in either like beautiful jasmine water or water that has like honey or milk or something in it. And then they emerge and they are put in new, like brand new clothes and their family's fancy jewelry. And they are shown to the community as a new woman. So that is typically how some of the more traditional rites of passage for girls go. But I love that in Judaism there's a similar practice for girls and boys, bar and bat mitzvahs, but I would love to hear more about them.
Yeah, for sure. It's kind of funny, like most religious kind of rites of passage, where it feels a little bit like perfunctory in that the religiosity and just like religion as a community activity is certainly not the main thing of what we're doing here. So it's kind of interesting. It's like the main thing that you do with bar mitzvah is that you're supposed to like kind of lead the service, which is and being a part of the Torah service, and you do all these rituals, and then some other stuff. It's like you read things out loud, and you like also part of that is like making a speech, and then you get to have a party afterwards, and you do it when you're 12 or 13.
I've been to some.
Yeah. Oh, bar mitzvahs are tight. Bar and bat mitzvahs are really tight.
So tight.
The thing is, Moiya, you can assume a bat mitzvah is something that was invented in modernity. Like a bat mitzvah is not a real thing.
Can imagine. That is one of the things I value and respect so much about Judaism, is that it's kind of baked into the religion that you learn and evolve as time goes on. Like the study of rabbinics is very beautiful, in my opinion.
Yes. It's depending on what sect of Judaism it is, it's like on a sliding I can't figure out anything about Christianity. It's like I don't know what Episcopalians do. Whatever it is, it's neat. I don't know how you're different than Catholics or Greek Orthodox or Roman Catholics. I don't get it. I don't know. Some of you like iconography. Some of you extremely don't like iconography. I don't know. But in
like you're saying you like to me.
Y'all, the general y'all. I don't get it. So, but in Judaism, I think it honestly, each sect is about how willing you are to accept that modernity exists. Like there are literally sects of Judaism where people dress the same way that they do in the shtetl. Like they wear big fur hats and big black coats because that's what we did when the shtetl existed before everything changed and the Fire Nation attacked. You know what I mean? So depending, especially in conservative Judaism, which is this kind of like middle area between Reform, which is where it's like it's almost. I find some parts of Reform Judaism to be a little like assimilative, but at the same time, it's the one that accepts like liberal beliefs the most as religion it wrestles with, social issues.
It's hippie Judaism. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, if there's gonna be a guitar, it's probably a Reform Judaism. But like I grew up conservative Jewish, which is again different than conservative political stuff. And there's a whole reckoning on wrestling with ideas and wrestling with modernity. Like the really interesting thing is that on Shabbat you're not supposed to do any work is ultimately what it is, and that in the modern age has stemmed to don't use electricity because electricity counts as work. But in conservative Judaism, there are both rabbinic ideas that you can and cannot turn on a light bulb. So either one you're doing is actually fine because they are both accepted.
They're both fine, but they're also both wrong.
No, they're not both wrong. They're both right.
Oh, so it only goes in that direction.
It's more like different rabbis have given like papers saying that it is or is not rabbinically fine to follow this particular thing on Shabbat, and they're both like follow either one, like, and then you can decide for yourself, and you can cite that rabbinic decision. Because I would say no, they're both right. I can't say that definitively, but I think that's the vibe that they're going for, from what I understand. So the bat mitzvah, going back to your original question, is that this was actually invented in 1922 by Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan, who arranged for his daughter Judith to become the first bat mitzvah in a public synagogue ceremony.
Wow.
Yeah. Rabbi Mordecai Kaplan was also the founder of Reconstructionism, which is another sect of Judaism, which is like really breaking down Judaism to fit in like modern American society. Basically, it's pretty interesting. Again, it's like you're trying to, as you become more religious, things are more traditional. So finding that balance is always really difficult. It's just very explicit in Judaism as opposed to like kind of the accepted ideas of how that touches in Christianity and I'm sure in other major religions that everyone practices.
Interesting. 1920s is simultaneously earlier and later than my expectations. Like worst case scenario, I was like the 70s, and best case scenario, I was like 1860s, you know? So 20s is right in the middle.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It really feels like once Jews got their feet established in America, that's why that time makes sense for me. Is like, okay, we've come. It's like this was after World War I, where people were migrating from Eastern Europe to America, and then like we were living in these spots like in New York City and the Lower East Side, but it was before World War II happened, where there were things to go to, but it wasn't like a free-for-all trying to escape all the things happening in World War II at the time. So like that makes sense for me. But it's interesting that like, you know, it does. I agree with you. It feels modern, but still old, which I think kind of feels good for me. I mean, it's been 100 years. It's been over 100 years.
That's kind of nice. Yeah. I wonder if there was a big acknowledgement of that, like a big centennial bat mitzvah bash somewhere.
There probably was. I'm looking at this article, and there was a 70th anniversary of Judith Kaplan's bar mitzvah that had happened. I think the Reconstruction of movement had like a celebration for that. So yeah, there must be.
Good.
That's cool. All right, Moiya, I have another question. Now that we're talking about religion, this one's pretty heady. Are you ready?
Yeah, I think I am.
Okay, so I have touched on what religion is in the Pokemon universe a little bit. There isn't like explicit religion. Because I think also because it's from Japan, this is also tied to like a lot of Shinto ideas, and you know, Pokemon represent elements, and there are different Pokemon that do all this stuff. But there is ultimately a creator. There is the alpha Pokemon, which I think is related to the alpha and the omega of what people call Jesus, and from what I understand of that whole biz. So there's Arceus is the alpha Pokemon, the original one.
Yeah.
It is said that the entire Pokemon universe and all the other legendary Pokemon were created by Arceus, who's kind of like a big llama who's a god with like there's a big like golden ring surrounding him, if you can envision that.
Oh yeah, I can envision a divine llama with a golden halo. Yeah. For sure.
What's extra funny is that Arceus speaks to you directly in one of the newest Pokemon games called Pokemon Legends Arceus, where basically you are brought back in time by him, and then he talks to you through a phone. Which, it's a cell phone that looks like him.
He talks to you through a phone that looks like him?
Yeah, like, you know what? You know when you see like an iPhone that has like a case that looks like a Pikachu? Yeah. Like imagine that, but it's for divine llama Pokemon.
Okay.
So
What a moment.
So Arceus is pretty funny. Here's my question. What does this say about the Pokemon world and this particular story, if the creator is a Pokemon and the entire things that humans do, and theoretically, Arceus has created both Pokemon and humans and the worlds, what does this say about their world that the divine creator was a Pokemon and yet we humans, like, catch and train and fight with Pokemon?
Great question. What an amazing topic that I'm sure we could discuss ad nauseum. But I want to approach this from two directions.
Please.
I want to approach it from the world builder perspective, trying to figure out what they were thinking when they made this decision. And I want to approach it from the in-world perspective, saying, what does it feel like for the characters in that world to have this be the case?
Right. I also want to point out, it's not, I don't think they don't like pray to Arceus. He's just kind of like a dude.
That does make sense.
Okay.
That does make sense, given the Shinto tie-in. It was created by a Japanese company, but a Japanese company that's trying to make a product with mass appeal for the U.S., which is mostly Christian.
Yes. I also want to quickly, which only supports your belief, is that Arceus was introduced in Gen 4, which came out in 2006 in Japan and 2007 in the West. So this was already definitely a popular, established video game at the time, just to help you with that.
Okay, because from the world builder perspective of answering this question, this feature does to me seem like the sign of kind of slapdash world building, and that's I do not mean that to insult their world building, because there is beautiful world building happening, but they made this game, they adapted it into a show, it got really popular, but the whole point of the game was these little monsters following children around and fighting for them, like fighting to entertain them. They had to then build in a lot more stuff to explain the world in a way that matched what they had already done and was appealing to a very broad audience. And so in my mind, they made this decision to have Arceus be the creator Pokemon because it fit in with their lore. They had already established that there were legendary Pokemon. They had already established that there were different generations of Pokemon, but it was mysterious because I think they want to have a lot of mystery in this world. This does not feel like the type of world that they want to be very like hard and explained and rational. There should be some mystery in it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but I think having Arceus be a Pokemon who created the universe is, and I don't know if this was how they made their decision, but from my perspective, it seems like a convenient way to get around the moral dilemma of the animal fighting that seems to underpin this world. Because they could say, this is the creator. Everything in the world happens kind of with their consent or even with their intention behind it or whatever. But that gives them an out to say it's fine that this is how the Pokemon are treated because the creator wouldn't let that happen if it wasn't okay.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. I'm also thinking about tying to how do we make this okay? It's well, in the Pokemon world, animals, monsters, and gods are all Pokemon. They're all the same. So anything that's alive that's not humans are Pokemon. So it kind of makes sense, right? The only thing, if it's not human, it has to be Pokemon, and then therefore God and legendaries, which we've already established in this thing. In the previous game, the god of water and the god of land are Pokemon. And so they were created, they must have a higher creator. So there we go. So it definitely, when you realize this is game 4, it certainly makes sense.
Yeah, because if you are a world builder who puts things out in iterative fashion, by the time you get to iteration 4 or 5, you're like, oh, I've already backed myself into all these corners. I need some way to explain everything. And sometimes it's not going to be the most elegant explanation. Sometimes it is going to feel like you just shoehorned something in.
For sure.
But this is definitely a deviation from a lot of real-world religions. Most people around the world imagine that the gods, the ultimate creators, not that every religion has one of those, but a lot of them assumed that the creator made us in their image. And so we envision them as humans, maybe with some like big glowing light, or they're bigger than us. There are some that had animal features to their gods.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, there's Ganesha with the elephant head in Hinduism. There's Anubis with the jackal head in Egyptian mythology. There's the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl in Nahua myths. So we often combine animals and humans to make them divine. And in those cases, a lot of those animals are also considered sacred. You know, the Nahua people would treat birds and serpents differently. Like they would maybe listen to them or follow them on a path or something. So yeah, it's definitely a deviation from real world religion, but that's because I think they had to just justify some of their earlier decisions.
No, that makes sense. It would be really wild if you were like, all right, hey, all elephants, we're going to race them perpetually.
Right.
You'd be like, what? It's like, because they're sacred, it's an extension of our creator. It's like, that doesn't make any sense.
We're going to have cow fights, and when they are too exhausted to fight anymore, we're just going to bring them back into their tiny little pocket dimensions.
Yeah. We're going to give them a little house.
A very little house.
The tiniest house. Moiya, I want to ask you one quick question before I tell you about your favorite Pokemon, because I think this is kind of an extension of the thing that you talk about all the time. My favorite thing about Pokemon is how many different types there are, and I love how various there are. So going off of what we talked about, like there's a ghost type and a fairy type Pokemon alongside these elemental types that we've talked about. Fire, water, grass, electric, rock, ground, flying. And then we have like and then the wild ones are over there, where it's like the mechanical ones, the spooky ones. Dark is literally evil. It's like being tricky. That is as it's translated from the Japanese. It's like actually evil is what dark means. Just from a magic perspective, what does it say that the elemental and like the scientific and the alchemical and the weird, capital W weird, are next to each other when we talk about these pocket monsters?
I think that this is a beautiful example of how you don't need to have a magic system that is pure, like, magic mysticism versus pure science and mechanical. I think that this, if you can even call it a magic system, I think it blends those two really well. And I think that is actually just a good reflection of how taxonomy works in the real world, because at the end of the day, these Pokemon are being studied by scientists. You know, there are all the tree professors who are studying these Pokemon like a real biologist does here on Earth. They are assigning them to different categories, and over time, as they encounter new Pokemon and they learn more about how the known Pokemon actually work, they have to create new categories, and they have to create cross-categorization, which is why you have like a fire fairy type Pokemon or whatever. I think that this is a sign that in that world, the people studying Pokemon, they saw the fire and the grass and the water really immediately, because those are forces of nature that seem very obvious at first. And then as they learned more, they had to create these other categories. And that to me is a very satisfying explanation that doesn't necessarily touch on the magic system of it all, but is just a consequence of human discovery and categorization.
No, it's cool. I think it's cool. There's something about like, I think about a lot of those magic systems where it's like, actually, magic doesn't exist. It's just science that we're doing all at the same time. And then there's like, magic's weird and it's strange. Or like, magic's creativity. And we're like, shut up, Petroprophets.
Like, to me, this just seems like big magic is only science we haven't discovered yet energy that infuses into the entire Pokemon world.
But I think that at the same time, it's like, it's cool instead of like trying to break it. Like, it's actually not magic, it's science, is a real like, no, you're not allowed to have wonder in your life sort of vibe. And I like that we're talking about like creature taxonomy, but they're still weird. And I like that. I'm also, my mind is getting a little blown in terms of like the types of, that a Pokemon can be two types, but they can also learn moves that are not of their type, because that has more to do with like physiology and ability than like categorization, which I find deeply interesting.
Yeah, I bet you do. As also a D&D person, I'm sure you find that very interesting.
Yeah.
This is something I'm dealing with in my current campaign where what I want to have as a character is not fitting neatly into the categories that were provided by the game. So
we'll talk about it. I'll help you. I'll help you out with that. That's fine. All right, Moiya, we are in the back part of WYFPATISSNAY, which, surprise, I'm going to say a bunch of nice stuff about you.
Yay!
I said it in the title, and now it's happening. Moiya, it is so lovely to talk to you, and I'm so happy that I met you through podcasting, as podcasting is the only way that adults are allowed to be friends anymore. But I think you're super smart, and I think you're super talented, and the main reason I want the writer's strike to end is so your TV show can happen. It's like otherwise I wanted to go on forever, but so that they finally will get what they deserve, which I still want. But I'm like, the little thing is like, but I need Moiya's TV show to exist. I need it to happen.
Thank you.
I love that you come on these shows, and I think that you're wonderful to be around, and why I wanted you to come back onto one of the shows that I host.
Oh, I'm already blushing. This is great. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Okay, Moiya, do you want to know about your new favorite Pokemon?
Yes, I do, and then I'm gonna go get a stuffed animal.
Yes, hell yeah. I have not looked it up, so I'm really hoping that this is the case. There should be, because I'm talking about Cosmog.
Ooh.
Look at...
Oh, it's so cute.
For those of you who don't know, Cosmog is a psychic-type Pokemon, legendary Pokemon from Gen 7, which is Alola, which are the Hawaiian Islands Pokemon. The whole thing about it, because there's like a connection, it's Pokemon Sun and Pokemon Moon, and Cosmog is kind of like the little guy in the center of it. Cosmog is the Nebula Pokemon. He's just a little guy, Moiya.
This little guy with like space buns.
He does. He has space buns. For those, if you haven't seen it before, basically Cosmog is like a little gaseous dude. His center is black, and then there's like kind of real space ombre going all over him. He's just like a little. He has little beady eyes, and he's yellow, and there's golden half circles around him. He's just adorable.
Definitely a ring. Which doesn't make sense for a nebula or a galaxy, but I'm here for it. And those sparkles.
It's like a spoiler on a car, Moiya. It's not real.
It's just for show. Those sparkles in the space one, that's a new star forming region right there. That's where you would expect to find some molecular clouds and some ionized gas.
Yeah. Cosmog's also, he's just gaseous. Moiya, canonically, Cosmog is 8 inches tall and weighs 0.2 pounds.
Oh, love. I am also very gassy.
So Cosmog is like the first evolution of, ordinarily legendary Pokemon don't evolve. So, but this is actually really cool. It's a new thing that happened in the later games. So Cosmog is stage 1, and then Cosmog becomes Cosmoem, which is basically Cosmog as a cocoon. So it becomes like those golden rings become like a cocoon. Almost like a little package. Is there something about, so Cosmog actually evolves really late. It's like level 40 something. So I wonder if like it's something about like how long like the cosmos and like galaxies like stand, like a young star is like cajillions of years old, and then eventually it evolves. I just thought of that.
Oh, I love that. I would really like if that's how they made that decision, because stuff in space does take a really long time. It can take a star millions of years to form. So
in the later generations, they're not just saying like, I don't know. Let's just do whatever. It's a little more intentional.
At least by the later generations, they're like looking at a Wikipedia article.
Right. At Game Freak, they took out the big book and said, actually, we need to start reading this. We can't just do whatever. We
can't just use this as a paperweight anymore, guys.
And then, depending on if you have sun or moon, Cosmoem becomes Solgaleo, which is a big sun lion, or Lunala, which is a big moon bat.
Oh my god. Yes. I want to be a big moon bat. Everything about this is perfect. Eric, you're right. This is my new favorite Pokemon. Coming in, I was like, no one's going to remove Ditto from my heart, but I don't know, Eric, you might have done it.
On top of that, Cosmog has a lot of fun powers in that since he's just full of gas, he just gets blown wherever he goes and he just says it. But if he's in a jam, he warps away to a safe place to hide.
Oh.
So teleportation powers for, let's just give this small child teleportation powers. That's fine.
That's totally fine.
And this is right from the Pokedex of Pokemon Moon. In ages past, it was called the Child of the Stars. It was said to be a Pokemon for another world, but no specific details are known. So I thought you would like that from a mythological perspective, that we assume it's an alien instead of studying space, which is kind of the combination of your whole thing.
Oh my God, I'm in love with this. There is a very non-zero chance that I will get a tattoo of Cosmog on my body.
I'll take it. I know, I love it. I didn't even think of the buns. The buns are adorable.
I know. So cute. Thank you. Oh, WYFPATISSNAY. It's great.
WYFPATISSNAY changing lives.
Truly.
I feel like now someone's going to have to get you a 3DS so you can play Sun and Moon now.
Yeah. Hey, anyone, if you want to send one to the Multitude office for me, please
Sun
feel free.
and Moon are good, too. They're really good. If Amanda's siblings had them, we have a DS. I don't think we ever had a 3DS. So if someone has it, we can get you to play Sun or Moon. Depending, well, I guess it has to be Moon because you want the big moon bat, right?
I do. Although I wouldn't balk at being a sun lion, but Moonbat definitely fits more into my personality.
Yeah, big goddess Moonbat feels right for you.
Yeah.
Cool. Moiya, thank you so much for coming on this Pokemon journey and teaching us all about societies around the world, which is good. I feel like every time you come on and or I make you talk about Pokemon, I'm making Moiya do something she doesn't like. So I'm glad that you're enjoying yourself.
That is not true, Eric. I do like Pokemon, and I love talking to you. So talking to you about Pokemon is just a net positive experience.
It's perfect. Moiya, if people really like listening to you talk and teaching them about stuff, where can they find you? What can they do?
You can do so much stuff if you like my thoughts or my voices. I am available online at Go Astro Mo. That's the best place to find me and my work on all of the platforms. But I wrote a book called The Milky Way that teaches you about the universe from the galaxy's point of view. I host a podcast about fictional world building. Eric has been on it a couple of times. It is called Exolore, and it's very fun. I host another podcast that's about space for people who are afraid of space, and Eric has not been on that one yet. But
right now, only scientists have been on that show. So I'm going to be kicking down the door and being like, hey, y'all want to talk about pop culture?
Yes. You know what, Eric? If I want to do an episode on Star Wars, I might have you on.
Oh, I do not care about Star Wars,
okay,
but I would love
mind.
to talk about it.
But that is called Pale Blue Pod. And also, if you are more interested in mythology, I host a YouTube show for PBS called Fate and Fabled that is all about mythology from around the world. I am very online.
Yeah, true.
I'm extremely Googleable. You can find anything about me.
Go Astro Mo everywhere.
Everywhere books are sold.
It's so funny when you're like, oh, go Astro Mo. I'm surprised she couldn't get Astro Moya or something. And knowing that every online astrologist or scientist or space scientist has Astro name as their Twitter name, I'm like, oh no. I can see why she needs to do it.
It's also because people do not know how to spell Moya, and so I didn't want
that's
my whole
fair.
name there. Yeah.
No, that's totally fair. Yeah, for sure. Go listen to Moiya's stuff. I love Pale Blue Pod. Y'all should go check it out. It's such a good show.
Thank you. It's very cozy.
Every time I see a thing, I'm just like, this should be Moiya. Why is Moiya not doing this? She should be doing it.
From your mouth to Arceus's ears.
Absolutely. This is WYFPATISSNAY, a show within Games and Feelings, which you already know. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled programming. Jasper will come on, and I think we're going to talk about sports soon, so I'm really excited about that. That's going to be fun. Yeah, you can check me out on the internet at L_Silvero, EL_SALVERO. My name if I was a Lucha Libre wrestler. Tell people about Games and Feelings and WYFPATISSNAY. It's fun. I like doing it, and it's great. Once again, Dr. Moiya McTier, DDS Esquire, thank you so much for being on the show. And Moiya, I'm going to say the thing that I say every single episode. I choose you! Friendship!
Friendship, that's beautiful. I love that. Thank you so much.
And Cosmog, who's my new favorite boy.
Oh, and Cosmo will also love this
Cosmo
edition.
and Cosmog will hang out. Games and Feelings is produced by Eric Silver and edited and mixed by Mischa Stanton. The theme music is Return to French Toast Castle by Jeff Bryce, and the art was created by Jessica Boyd. Find transcripts for this episode and all episodes at our website, gamesandfeelings.com. Until next time, press X to enjoy the podcast.